Why being alone after 65 can make you healthier, happier, and wiser. You've spent a lifetime putting others first. Now the quiet feels unfamiliar, maybe even heavy. But what if being alone isn't a loss, but a gift? A turning point where your health, clarity, and peace finally take center stage. In this video, you'll discover why solitude after 65 can heal more than you think. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where are you watching from, and stay with me until the end. What you hear may change the way you live the rest of your life. Number 1. Solitude after 65 is a conscious awakening, not withdrawal. Loneliness expresses the pain of being alone. Solitude expresses the glory of being alone. Paul Tillich. At the age of 65, a quiet transformation often begins. For decades, life may have been defined by constant demands, careers, parenting, caregiving, social obligations. But as this new chapter opens, many individuals begin to discover a surprising truth. Solitude, once feared or misunderstood, becomes a deeply fulfilling and health-enhancing choice. This shift is not about withdrawing from life, but rather awakening to it more fully with clarity, autonomy, and renewed purpose. The biology of solitude reveals just how profound this awakening can be. Research from Harvard Medical School highlights that intentional periods of solitude activate the brain's default mode network, a neurological system tied to deep thinking, memory consolidation, and self-reflection. In older adults, especially those over 65, this activation is linked to increased mental sharpness and improved mood regulation. Solitude, when chosen with care, becomes not a retreat, but a restorative state that enhances cognitive and emotional health. The heart, too, benefits. In a 2018 longitudinal study published in the Journal of Aging and Health, over 2,100 adults aged 65 and older were followed for 5 years. Those who consistently engaged in solitary wellness activities such as journaling, meditative walking, or solo gardening showed 21% lower levels of C-reactive protein, a critical marker for inflammation and cardiovascular stress. Their solitude was not passive, it was deeply therapeutic. These findings are reflected in real lives. One example that stands out is Mr. Howard, age 68, a former postal worker from Michigan. After retiring, he found himself restless and uneasy in the sudden stillness of his days. But instead of filling his schedule with distractions, he began each morning sitting on his back porch with a mug of black coffee, simply watching the wind ripple through the trees. Over time, that moment became the center of his routine. He later told me it was in those quiet mornings that he finally began to feel whole, not because he was alone, but because he was no longer trying to be everywhere else. It's vital to distinguish solitude from loneliness. Solitude is deliberate, empowered, and reflective. Loneliness is painful, involuntary, and isolating. Teaching this distinction is an act of care. When solitude is reframed as a form of self-respect and psychological nourishment, older adults begin to embrace it not with fear, but with intention. Health professionals and families can support this by encouraging daily quiet care, whether it's a solo nature walk, an afternoon of painting, or a few minutes of deep breathing before bed. These small acts recalibrate the nervous system and promote resilience. Psychologically, solitude offers a gateway to meaning. Viktor Frankl, the founder of logotherapy, wrote that the search for purpose is the primary driver of human well-being. After 65, solitude often becomes the setting where this search bears fruit. Without external noise, older adults begin to reflect on what truly mattered and what no longer does. According to the University of Michigan's Health and Retirement Study, individuals who maintain a sense of meaning and purpose after 65 reduce their risk of all-cause mortality by up to 32%. Choosing solitude at 65 is not a step back, it is a conscious stride forward. It represents maturity, autonomy, and grace. It brings the body into balance and the mind into focus. It clears the path for deep listening to one's own voice, to inner wisdom, to the quiet questions that only emerge when the world is hushed. For anyone standing at this powerful threshold, the invitation is simple. Make space for quiet and treat it as essential to your well-being as any medicine. Begin with 5 minutes a day sitting by a window, writing a thought, walking without a destination. Over time, solitude becomes more than a habit. It becomes a form of peacekeeping. And in this peace, there is a beautiful truth. Life at 65 is not winding down. It is unfolding inward into the richest part of the journey. Number two, freedom from the need to please others after 65. What if the greatest act of health and happiness after 65 is not taking another pill, joining another club, or saying yes one more time, but finally and firmly learning how to say no? One of the most liberating shifts in the aging process is the release of an old, deeply ingrained pattern, the urge to please others at the expense of one's own well-being. In youth and middle age, the desire to be liked, accepted, and agreeable can shape how people move through their lives. But after 65, something begins to change. The clock feels more precious. Energy is more limited, and many begin to realize they no longer need to spend it on keeping others comfortable while quietly betraying their own needs. This is not rebellion, it is wisdom. From a psychological standpoint, the desire to please is often rooted in survival instincts. Belonging ensured safety in early human societies. But in modern times, especially for aging adults, the constant effort to accommodate others can become a source of chronic stress. According to a 2016 study from the University of California, San Francisco, older adults who frequently suppress their true feelings in social situations have significantly higher levels of cortisol and report lower life satisfaction. Over time, that emotional suppression correlates with increased inflammation, fatigue, and depression. Freedom from this pattern is not only emotional but profoundly physiological. It lightens the load on the heart and nervous system. It brings the parasympathetic system online, the part of the body responsible for rest, repair, and digestion. Saying no, when necessary, is not a rejection of others. It is an invitation to honor self-worth. Take the story of Ruth, a 9-year-old former nurse from Vermont. For most of her life, she was the dependable one, the helper, the one who showed up, even when she was running on empty. But after retiring, something inside her shifted. One day, when asked to host yet another family event she didn't have the energy for, she paused, took a breath, and said with grace, "I love you, but I won't be able to do that this time." Her heart didn't race, she didn't apologize, and in that moment she told me later she felt 20 pounds lighter, not physically, but spiritually. This moment is transformative not just for individuals, but for the culture of aging itself. In America, older adults are often expected to be endlessly available to babysit, to volunteer, to attend every gathering. While connection is essential, so is rest, so is choice. So is protecting what remains of one's time with discernment. Learning to say no after 65 is a form of emotional strength that supports cognitive health as well. Studies from the National Institute on RGNG suggest that individuals who assert personal boundaries maintain greater mental clarity and report a stronger sense of personal agency. When older adults stop people-pleasing, they often report more satisfying relationships, ones built on respect, not obligation. What can this look like in daily life? It may be as simple as pausing before accepting an invitation, asking the body, "Do I really want to do this, or do I feel I should?" It might mean creating quiet rituals of protection, like turning off the phone during meals, setting one day a week as sacred rest, or practicing gentle language that communicates limits with kindness. "That doesn't work for me today, but thank you for thinking of me." These moments of boundary setting are not selfish. They are self-honoring. They are what allows someone at 65 to live not on autopilot, but with intention. Aging with dignity includes learning that peace does not come from pleasing everyone. It comes from living in alignment with one's truth. The next time an old reflex to overextend begins to rise, remember, the body knows, the mind knows. Saying no without guilt, without shame is an act of love, not just for others, but for the self that has waited decades to be heard. Number 3, a focus on meaningful relationships over social quantity after 65. For most of his life, Mr. Daniel, now 67, was what his neighbors affectionately called the heartbeat of the block. His calendar was always full: potlucks, Volunteer shifts, Sunday brunches, weekday lunches, holiday get-togethers. His phone rang constantly. He never said no. Yet when he retired, he confessed to a close friend that he had never felt more lonely despite being surrounded by people. "I realized I had 100 friends," he said quietly, "but I didn't know who I could really call at 2 a.m. if I were in trouble." That realization marks a profound turning point in many lives after 65. Aging often brings the painful clarity that more is not the same as meaningful. The shift from social quantity to emotional quality is not only natural, it is neurologically and emotionally necessary. Studies in neuroscience and gerontology consistently support this transformation. A 2018 study published in the Journals of Gerontology, Series B, revealed that older adults who maintain just a few emotionally close relationships show significantly higher levels of life satisfaction and lower levels of depression, regardless of how many acquaintances they have. Loneliness, in this context, is not the absence of people, it's the absence of emotional depth. After 65, the brain begins to prioritize emotional regulation over novelty. This is known as the socio-emotional selectivity theory, developed by Dr. Laura Carstensen at Stanford University. It suggests that as people age and perceive time as more limited, they naturally begin to focus on relationships that are emotionally rewarding, choosing depth and authenticity over breadth and obligation. It is not a sign of giving up, it is a sign of waking up to what truly nourishes the spirit. Consider Maria, a 72-year-old retired school principal in Arizona. In her younger years, she was deeply involved in community clubs and alumni events. But after surviving breast cancer at 68, she reevaluated her priorities. She gently stepped away from her wider social circle and began spending more time with just 3 people: her sister, her longtime best friend, and her granddaughter. She now calls these relationships her life givers. They don't exhaust her, they energize her. She says the conversations are quieter, but the connection is deeper. She laughs more, she cries more, and, most importantly, she feels seen. At this stage in life, older adults often gain the emotional clarity to let go of surface-level interactions, those that are polite but empty, familiar but not fulfilling. This isn't coldness, it's wisdom. It's understanding that time and energy are no longer limitless, and what remains should be spent where the heart feels safe. This has profound implications for mental health. A report by the National Institute on Aging confirms that meaningful relationships serve as a buffer against cognitive decline. Older adults with strong emotional bonds show better memory retention and lower rates of Alzheimer's-related changes. It turns out that what protects the brain isn't constant stimulation, but emotional trust and presence. This emotional economy invites a practical shift in daily living. Instead of filling every social slot on the calendar, try setting aside time each week to connect deeply and intentionally with 1 or 2 people who truly matter. That may mean writing a handwritten letter to a grandchild, having a quiet lunch with a lifelong friend, or simply sitting on the porch beside someone who knows you without needing explanation. The goal is not to be surrounded. The goal is to be understood. This shift also requires courage. It may mean letting go of relationships that drain or diminish. It may mean accepting fewer invitations or stepping out of social circles that no longer align with who you are now. That is not a loss. It is a refinement, a return to sincerity. After 65, the most powerful friendships are not always the loudest. They are the ones where silence feels comfortable, where you can be messy or quiet or uncertain and still feel valued. Let this be a gentle invitation. Prune the garden of your connections, not with judgment, but with love. What remains may be fewer, but it will be richer. And in that richness, life after 65 becomes not just quieter, but fuller. Number 4. Strong self-reliance and emotional independence after 65. A tree that has stood through many winters no longer leans on younger saplings for support. It stands tall, quietly resilient, with roots that run deep. In many ways, emotional independence after 65 is much like that seasoned tree, calm, stable, and wise, not because it never bent, but because it learned to stand on its own. For much of adult life, many people are conditioned to seek emotional support externally through affirmation, companionship, and approval. These needs are valid and deeply human, but as the years unfold, a subtle shift often occurs. After 65, some individuals begin to draw more comfort from within than from the outside. They don't need constant reassurance or someone to fill the quiet. They are no longer afraid of solitude. They are at home in their own presence. This self-reliance is not detachment. It is emotional maturity. According to a 2021 study published in Psychology and Aging, individuals over 65 who exhibit higher levels of emotional self-sufficiency report lower anxiety, better sleep, and higher overall satisfaction with life. The researchers observed that emotional independence correlates with stronger coping mechanisms and reduced emotional volatility in the face of loss, disappointment, or health changes. This quiet strength is often hard-earned. Consider Robert, a 70-year-old retired firefighter from Pennsylvania. He spent most of his life in high adrenaline situations, making split-second decisions depending on team dynamics. After retirement, the silence of daily life was deafening, but instead of filling the silence, Robert leaned into it. He began journaling, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. At first, it felt strange, but gradually, his notebook became a mirror, helping him process old grief, anger, and gratitude. His wife, who passed 2 years ago, still visits him through memory, through ritual, through the quiet strength of remembering. Robert has not replaced his losses with noise. He has transformed them into insight. Many older adults also begin to notice they are less reactive. Things that once stirred anxiety or self-doubt now pass with less turbulence. Emotional independence is not about suppression. It is about regulation. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for complex decision-making and impulse control, tends to strengthen in function among emotionally mature older adults, as shown in brain imaging studies from the University of California, Berkeley. This allows them to pause before reacting, to choose serenity over conflict, and to honor rather than escape their emotional experience. This does not mean closing oneself off. On the contrary, emotional independence often allows for deeper, more authentic connection. When a person no longer depends on others to fix their emotions, they become better listeners, more present companions, and less entangled in unnecessary drama. They stop taking things personally. They begin to understand that others' reactions are not always reflections of their own worth. Daily practices can reinforce this inner strength. One of the most powerful is learning to sit with oneself each day, even just for 10 minutes without distractions, without tasks, simply breathing and noticing. Another is writing a single line each night that begins with, "Today I noticed." These small habits train the nervous system to tolerate quiet, to embrace reflection, and to strengthen the internal voice. It may also help to revisit and rewrite one's narrative. After 65, many people carry invisible stories of hurt, of failure, of unmet expectations. Emotional independence invites a new chapter, one that does not erase the past but reclaims it with wisdom. It says, "I have walked through loss and love, and still I stand. I do not need to be rescued. I only need to be real." Let this be an invitation to trust your own inner guidance. You are no longer a sapling bending to every wind. You are a rooted, steady presence in your own life. And in that quiet steadiness lies a truth more comforting than applause. You are enough, exactly as you are. Number 5, time for reflection, growth, and inner learning after 65. Imagine this. The sun has just begun to rise. A quiet home is still, undisturbed by phones or obligations. No one is rushing you. You sit by a window, coffee warming your hands, and for the first time in years, you ask yourself a question not out of urgency, but out of curiosity. What have I truly learned from my life? This, right here, is the sacred space that opens after 65. It is not an ending, but an invitation. For the first time in decades, life slows enough to allow for something extraordinary. Reflection that is not reactive, growth that is not pressured, and learning that turns inward toward the heart. In the fast pace of earlier life stages, working, raising children, navigating challenges, there is often little room for contemplation. But neuroscience tells us that the reflective brain remains active and capable throughout the aging process. In fact, a 2020 study from the University of Chicago found that older adults who engage in regular reflection-based activities such as journaling, spiritual reading, or quiet contemplation show increased gray matter density in the medial prefrontal cortex, the area associated with meaning-making and long-term memory. Reflection, it turns out, not only preserves the mind, it nourishes the soul. One of the clearest examples of this came from Charles, a 4-year-old former attorney from Oregon. After decades of courtroom debates and relentless schedules, he found himself staring at long, quiet days post-retirement. At first, he felt adrift. But one afternoon, he began sorting through old letters in his attic. What began as nostalgia turned into something deeper: patterns, regrets, milestones, growth. He started writing reflections, not for anyone else, but for himself. 3 years later, Charles now considers those morning writings his most honest conversations. "I've spent my life talking to people," he said. "Now I finally listen to myself." This inner listening supports mental and emotional well-being in profound ways. Reflection enhances cognitive flexibility, improves emotional regulation, and provides a framework for integrating one's life narrative. In psychology, this process is known as life review therapy, often used with older adults to reduce depression and anxiety. But beyond therapy, it becomes a personal ritual, a way of harvesting wisdom from lived experience. After 65, inner growth takes on a different pace and form. It is not about acquiring something new, but deepening what is already within. This is often when people begin asking questions, not of achievement, but of essence. Who am I when I am not producing? What do I believe now that I've seen the world change? What matters and what never did? This shift creates space for healing, for learning, forgiveness of others and of oneself, and for reimagining one's story through a gentler, wiser lens. Many find that their spiritual life, whether rooted in religion or simply in wonder, becomes more vibrant. Moments in nature, silence, or music begin to teach lessons that books once did. What's powerful is that these moments don't require dramatic change. A simple daily practice, such as lighting a candle before dinner and silently giving thanks, or taking a 10-minute reflection walk each evening, can ground the day in intention. These quiet acts become portals through which inner learning grows. Reflection also teaches older adults to recognize how far they've come. After decades of striving, many finally see that they do not need to fix or chase anymore. They are allowed to sit in their own presence and simply be. That presence, free from distraction, reveals an intelligence not measured in degrees or titles, but in calm, perspective, and peace. Let this time be seen not as a retreat from growth, but its finest expression. When the outside world quiets, the inner world expands. And in that sacred space, wisdom is no longer something to earn, it is something to remember. So each day, if even for a few minutes, make room for that remembering. In it lies not just knowledge, but transformation. Number 6, clearer boundaries and stronger protection of time and energy after 65. At a recent family dinner, a 8-year-old grandmother calmly told her adult daughter that she would no longer be available for weekly babysitting. "I love my grandchildren," she said gently, "but I need time for my own health and peace." The room fell silent. Some nodded in understanding. Others whispered about selfishness and change. That moment sparked tension, but it also marked a quiet revolution. Setting boundaries after 65 often meets resistance, not because it's wrong, but because it's long overdue. For decades, many older adults, especially women, have been conditioned to place everyone else's needs above their own. The expectation lingers to always be available, agreeable, accommodating. But aging demands a new kind of wisdom, one that protects energy as fiercely as it once gave it away. From a medical perspective, this shift is essential. The aging nervous system becomes less tolerant of chronic stress. Cortisol, the stress hormone, lingers longer in the body after emotional overexertion. According to a 2020 study in the Journal of Psychosomatic Research, seniors who consistently maintain personal boundaries report better cardiovascular health, fewer sleep disturbances, and reduced symptoms of anxiety. Protecting one's time and energy is not selfish, it is science-backed self-care. Take Eleanor, age 70, from Indiana. For years, she said yes to every request: rides to the airport, last-minute errands, unending obligations. She began to feel exhausted, emotionally resentful, and quietly invisible. Then one morning, after canceling a doctor's appointment to help a neighbor with groceries, she realized something had to change. That afternoon, she sat down and wrote 3 simple sentences. My time matters, my health matters, my peace matters. She placed them on her fridge and began making decisions from that place forward. The transformation was subtle but profound. She started declining tasks that drained her. She scheduled weekly rest days. She even told a close friend, I love you, but I can't be everything for you right now. The result? Her relationships didn't collapse, they evolved. Friends respected her more. She smiled more. Her blood pressure stabilized. Her voice became steadier. Her life, finally, was hers again. Clear boundaries don't push people away. They invite people to engage with you in a healthier, more respectful way. They say, I value our connection, and I also value myself. After 65, time becomes one of life's most precious resources. Every hour spent out of guilt or fear is an hour stolen from joy, from rest, from meaning. This isn't just emotional theory. The National Institutes of Health reports that seniors who prioritize personal boundaries experience improved mental focus, enhanced immune function, and slower rates of cognitive decline. When the body feels safe, when it is not constantly bracing for intrusion, it heals. Creating these boundaries can start with small, firm steps. Turn down one request this week that doesn't feel aligned. Establish a quiet hour daily with no phone calls or interruptions. Practice saying phrases like, that doesn't work for me right now, or I'm focusing on my well-being today. These are not refusals, they are declarations of dignity. And if the people around you protest or misunderstand, let them. Growth often triggers discomfort, but discomfort is not danger. It is a sign of change. You've spent a lifetime showing up for others. Now, it's time to show up for yourself with the same compassion, patience, and loyalty. Setting boundaries after 65 doesn't make you less loving. It makes your love wiser, more sustainable, and more honest. Let this chapter of life be defined not by depletion, but by discernment. You are not here to fulfill every expectation. You are here to live fully, freely, and without apology. Number 7. A life lived with more intention and less distraction after 65. Here's a little-known secret among people who thrive after 65. Their lives actually get richer when they begin doing less. Not less of what matters, but less of what doesn't. They stop chasing what once felt urgent and start savoring what is truly meaningful. They aren't withdrawing from life. They're finally curating it with clarity, care, and choice. This change rarely happens overnight. For most of adult life, many people live under the spell of more activities, more responsibilities, more noise. But after 65, something shifts, often quietly, sometimes after a health scare or a personal loss, and many begin to realize that true well-being isn't found in doing more. It's found in doing what matters, with presence and purpose. The science of aging confirms this wisdom. A 2017 study published in the Journal of Aging and Mental Health found that older adults who regularly practice intentional living, defined as aligning daily actions with core values, report higher levels of psychological well-being, lower perceived stress, and even improved memory function. The brain, it seems, responds positively not to busyness, but to meaningful focus. Intentional living doesn't require a dramatic lifestyle overhaul. It begins with awareness. Consider James, 66, a retired military officer from Colorado. After decades of structure and intensity, his early retirement years felt aimless. He filled his days with errands, TV, and social obligations, but something always felt missing. Eventually, after reading a book on mindfulness, he made one small change. Each morning he asked himself, "What do I want to feel today?" That question became a compass. He began pruning his calendar, saying no to obligations that felt hollow, and choosing activities that grounded him, reading poetry, tending a small garden, calling his grandson once a week. Within months, his blood pressure improved, his sleep deepened, and he described his days as quieter but fuller. Distraction, especially in the digital age, can rob older adults of clarity and peace. Constant notifications, news cycles, and expectations can fragment attention and elevate anxiety. But with age comes the opportunity, and often the desire to turn inward, to recenter. Neuropsychological research from the University of Wisconsin shows that older adults who reduce multitasking and digital exposure demonstrate greater emotional regulation and increased feelings of life satisfaction. This transition into focused living invites a spiritual quality, not necessarily religious, but reverent. The small becomes sacred. A slow breakfast, a handwritten note, an unhurried walk, all of these become acts of quiet devotion to the present moment. Intention restores the beauty in simplicity. Daily rituals help anchor this way of living. Try beginning each day with a question, not a task. What truly matters today? Set aside 5 minutes in the evening to reflect on what felt meaningful and what didn't. Gradually, this builds a muscle of discernment, a gentle but firm ability to recognize which parts of life deserve your attention and which do not. Living with intention also gives older adults something society rarely offers: permission. Permission to say no, to move slowly, to do one thing well instead of 10 things halfway, to savor rather than rush. It is a return to rhythm, to authenticity, and to personal truth. This is not a step back from life. It is a step deeper into it. If this stage of life is a quieter season, let it also be the most deliberate. Let distractions fall away like autumn leaves. Let each choice feel like a quiet yes to what is real. Because at 65 and beyond, every day matters. And a life lived with intention is not just healthier, it is luminous. Life after 65 is not a season of decline, it is a season of awakening. These years offer the rare gift of slowing down, of choosing peace over pressure, and of living more deliberately than ever before. Science reminds us that solitude can calm the heart and sharpen the mind. Psychology teaches us that deep, intentional relationships protect against loneliness and depression. Real stories show us that when older adults set boundaries and embrace quiet, they discover freedom and joy that once felt out of reach. The message is simple, but profound. Health in later life is shaped less by how much you do and more by how you choose to do it. Each time you say no to what drains you, you say yes to your own vitality. Each moment of reflection allows your brain to heal and your spirit to grow. Each relationship chosen with care adds not just comfort, but strength. Aging wisely means giving yourself permission to protect your time, honor your energy, and live with intention. You do not need grand gestures to change your health or your happiness. Start small. Take 5 quiet minutes each morning just for yourself. Call one person who matters deeply instead of attending 3 events that leave you tired. Write 1 sentence each night about something you are grateful for. These are not little things, they are life-giving choices. So here is my invitation. Share in the comments what you will do this week to care for your health and peace. Your story may inspire someone else. And if you have not subscribed to our channel yet, please subscribe right now so you will never miss the lessons and encouragement we share. Together, we can continue building a community where wisdom is celebrated and aging is honored as the richest season of life. Thank you for watching. May your days be filled with strength, clarity, and